Hello! If you remember from my book haul right at the beginning of the year, I showed this Johanna Basford 2021 calendar, one of those ones that you colour in yourself, and today I thought I would colour in March's picture. So let me just show you what I've done so far. This was just the inside cover, as you can see here. Then we've got January, which I coloured with marker pens, just plain water-based felt pens, and also February that I did with other felt pens that I found. And so for March, there's a really cute frog. And I thought this would be so much fun to colour today. February was a busy month doing all of those really large coloured pencil review videos, and so I'm feeling a little bit burnt out and I just need something that I don't have to think about. So I thought this would be really fun. I had earmarked this picture to do earlier in the year because I think it's one of my favourites. It's just so cute. Most of the other ones are repeating patterns which are a lot more complicated, but this one is a little bit more basic, and I just really like frogs, so I thought I would colour this in today, but I'm going to use inks, and I decided to get my Sennelier inks out. These are shellac based and waterproof once they're dry. If you saw my calligraphy video, those are also the same inks in tiny bottles, but I'm going to use my large bottles today. So let's get into it. I am so excited just to do some colouring. It has been a long time and I miss it. I had a lot of fun with this. It was just so relaxing putting the colours down and not having to come up with a design or anything. As you can see, I started out with the yellow and then I mixed in the darker green with the yellow so it made a lighter green, and then I sort of progressively got darker as I went throughout the frog. I mean, I wasn't very original with my colouring, but I did end up using some of the turquoise as well. I found it easier just to drop out the inks onto a porcelain palette and use them like I would any other watercolour. They work pretty much exactly the same, except the fact that they dry really quickly, and because they're shellac, it's almost like painting with nail polish a little bit. They're really shiny and they do get a little bit gluggy after a while. You will notice during this that I did actually clean my palette quite a lot of times because I did not want to let those inks dry onto it. By doing that, it makes it really hard to get that dried ink off. It is exactly like peeling off nail polish kind of thing, and wiping it off before it fully dries is just so much easier. So I just built up the colours and I went with the green, yellow and turquoise palette for most of the frog. I really love these colours. The turquoise is one of my favourites. All of them that I used here are really transparent and fabulous to layer with. As you can see, I'm using the same green to do the lily pad. I was far too lazy to come up with all sorts of different colours, and sometimes I just prefer to work with a fairly limited colour palette. I did, however, add some shadows into it eventually, especially around where the frog was sitting, because it just looked too one-dimensional. I started painting the shadows with the turquoise that I already had out because I was trying to use it up, but it just ended up not being dark enough because it is a very transparent colour and the value of it is pretty much the same as the green. So I got out the indigo, and that was a much darker colour. It was so good, and because it's a blue undertone, it blended in really well with the existing greens, so it was perfect for a shadow, more so than a black or a grey, which would have just been too dull. And then I went in with sanguine to paint the little spots on the frog, just to give a bit of contrast, so not all of the colours were side by side on the colour palette, and I think this just gave it a bit more interest. And I really love the sanguine. It's like a really muted red, and it's very useful for a lot of paintings, I find, so it's a really good one to have. It's great to write with as well, very old-fashioned. paper of this calendar is really thick. It's almost like a cardstock, and so it took the ink without buckling at all. Now I'm going into the flowers, and I pretty much just made up the colours as I went along. And I don't have every single colour in the Sennelier ink range, so I was limited by which ones I had. That carmine that I'm using at the moment is actually my most recent one because the scarlet is just a bit too orange, and the carmine mixed with the scarlet makes a really intense red, and then the carmine on its own is a bit pinker. I noticed about this point that the flowers are actually symmetrical on either side of the frog, and so rather than doing something that was asymmetrical, I decided to do matching colours on both sides. For the most part, I prefer to have symmetry, especially if the design is symmetrical. I want to have the same colours. It bothers me if they're different. And then I just went in with some ultramarine. I decided not to have all of the flowers in those red and orange colours. I thought it would be nice to break it up by adding in some ultramarine and some of the indigo. That indigo ink is probably one of my favourites. It's such a beautifully deep colour. The ultramarine is a nice colour too, though I noticed that when I diluted it out with water when I was rinsing it, that it actually went quite purple once it was a lot more of a faded wash. And this is a different blue. This one's cobalt blue, although it looks very much like phthalo, and I think this blue is my favourite out of the two, going between ultramarine and the cobalt, but I just adore the indigo with both of them, so all three blues are good, and I figured they're probably not exactly realistic colours for flowers, but does it really matter? It's not a very realistic picture. And then I did break out some of my smaller pots from the calligraphy set because I noticed the calligraphy had a really bright lemon yellow, whereas the large pot that I have just above the palette there is a Senegal yellow and is much warmer, so the two of them worked really well. And then I actually grabbed one of my Bombay India inks because I realised I don't have a magenta in the Sennelier range, and I really wanted some of that pinky magenta. I mixed it with some of the Sennelier cobalt blue and it made a stunning purple, so I need to find me a magenta. It's such a useful colour to have, and I found I missed it in this quite a bit. I also found the deep green in the calligraphy set, which was greener than the turquoise but not as green as the other green that I've got. I think it's a spring green or something in the larger bottles, so I think I might need to find some larger bottles of these, but it goes really well with the turquoise, so those were quite pretty. And I just kind of threw all of the colours around in different parts of each flower and just tried to tie them all together. Then I went over everything with that lemon yellow because the white was a bit too stark. I don't know if you could see there were quite a few splatters on the background, and I ended up fixing this a bit later. I also don't have any large pots of brown, so I grabbed a couple of the brown ones out, the walnut and the sepia, I think, and you could just briefly see me using the lid opener there because of course they would not come off just by hand. And then I just basically painted the little dragonfly things in the same colours that I'd painted the flowers. Just randomly again, I tried to do matching ones, although a couple of the dragonflies were slightly different from each other, but I just picked a few colours because by this time I just really wanted to be done, and they were getting quite fiddly, so I just made it up as I went along and picked colours that I thought would go nicely together, and once again that indigo because it's so pretty, and I just think it goes really well against all of the really bright colours, so you have a few dark ones for contrast. There's the two yellows together, it's quite hard to see the difference, and this is where I just started bashing colour onto the background in tiny little drops because I already had made a mess of the background, and doing that just hid everything. And here's the final shiny picture. It came out really well, I think. I'm very happy with the colours. I loved using these inks and I must do some more paintings with them. And here it is hanging up just over my drafting table. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button, and I will see you all again in my next video, which will be really soon. Swatchy later. Bye!